네, 안녕하세요. 블록미디어 최동혁입니다. 최근 인공지능 AI가 시장에서 굉장히 많은 관심을 받으면서 역시 같이 주목받는 부분 중 하나가 바로 이 인공지능이 사용하는 데이터입니다. 세상에는 굉장히 많은 데이터들이 존재하죠. 그리고 그 데이터는 굉장히 많은 부분이 이 인공지능의 학습에 사용이 되면서 인공지능의 발전을 이끌어가고 있기도 합니다. 최근에 주목받는 것은 이렇게 시장에 공개된 데이터들이 이미 굉장히 많은 부분이 인공지능의 학습에 사용이 되었고, 이 학습을 더욱 개선하기 위해서 개인이 가진 혹은 특정한 집단이나 기업이 가진 데이터를 이 인공지능의 학습에 추가적으로 사용한다라는 것들이 굉장히 주목을 받고 있기도 한데요. 이 이슈 속에서 굉장히 중요한 포인트 중 하나가 우리가 이렇게 제3자에 의해서 제공되는 데이터가 어떻게 올바른 데이터인지 확인할 수 있느냐라는 부분입니다. 오늘 함께하는 수업은 이 인공지능에 활용되는 데이터를 온체인, 웹3 기술을 활용해서 직접 인증, 베리파이를 하고 이를 통해서 더 건전한, 더 훌륭한 AI 에이전트의 발달을 이끌 수 있다고 말하는 프로젝트입니다. 오늘은 수험의 파운더 야닉 마이슨 씨를 모시고 함께 이야기를 나눠볼까 하는데요. 간단한 인사로 인터뷰 시작해 보도록 하겠습니다. Hello, Yannick. Thanks for sharing your time today. Can you share some brief introductions about yourself and kind of your roles in the swarm? I think it would be helpful for us to show some more details about what is the swarm and what's your vision and what you guys are looking for.
Yes, sure. First of all, thank you for inviting me, Ethan. And it's really nice to hear your voice in Korean again. Every time I hear the Korean language, I don't know, it does something to my body. I really find it like a very exemplary and interesting like language. I used to be a fan of some like Korean manga, not manga, the Korean cartoon back in the day, but it was not in Korean.
I see.
In Dutch on the Dutch television. Um, yeah. So my name is Yannick. A lot of you guys probably already know me because we've been on this platform before and we've been speaking with you before. But yeah, today I am representing my new project, which is called Swarm Network. And what we're building is a decentralized framework for bringing truth to the world. And that sounds really grandiose, but let me break it down a little bit. So what it means is that we're using a network that consists of swarms, and swarms are agents that are grouped together with a certain purpose with the oversight of a human being. So for example, you, Ethan, you can create your own swarm and you can manage that swarm. So you can say, okay, I want this swarm to perform certain tasks related to our protocol. And what our protocol does, or what it's intended to do, is that it takes arbitrary data. So data which is, it might serve a certain purpose on chain. So from our context, we started actually developing prediction markets, and we realized that it's really hard to conclude and solve some kind of these markets, right? To give the final conclusion, whether it's like true or not true. So a lot of the times, this data that you base a prediction market off is not available on chain. You need to bring it on chain. And then there's an issue because who are you to bring this data on chain, right? Then I'm a centralized authority, right? It's just me or maybe my team or somebody that creates a market and says, okay, it's wrong or it's right. And you have a bunch of protocols that try and solve this, but they don't really solve it in a correct manner, in my opinion. So how this network works is you have a piece of data, right? This can be it can be a claim, it can be a piece of content, it can be data that is maybe price data of Solana on a certain DEX, for example, and you take that data and then you put it into the protocol. And what the protocol does, it runs inference on all of these agents that have access to different data sources, and they collectively verify this piece of information. Once this piece of information is either verified or falsified, it then is pushed into the protocol. And then with that state change, you can do something in a smart contract logic. So I give you an example. Yeah. So we created a product which is called roll up lower dash news on Twitter. And it works in Korean as well. So if you wish, you can try it in Korean. So you find a thread on X, on Twitter, and you find it, you think, hey, maybe this information is not really true, or maybe there's a lot of information which I don't really know anything about. And this person is making a claim that something is true or something is false, or maybe that something happened. What you then can do is you can tag rollup news and you add the word rollup. And what it then does, it takes that piece of information, including all of the comments, and it runs it through the protocol. What happens is we have a principle which is called atomic claims. So you take a very large piece of information, you break it down into the smallest verifiable unit of a claim. We can talk about this later more in depth, but what then happens is that each of the agents that is responsible, is a large group of agents. So we've built our first swarm. It's around 100 agents. They all go out and use their tools that they have access to. So different agents have access to different data sources and different tools. They then go and try and verify these claims, right? So, and then eventually they finish that in around 1.5 minutes. We're speeding it up to maybe like sub 20 seconds, but for now it's 1.5 minutes. Then you get a message, you get a comment with a link, and then in that link you will be able to see, okay, how many claims were in this article, how many are true, how many are false, how many are unsubstantiated, which means cannot be verified true or false, like more information is required. And this all happens through this kind of like agent network, right? So you can imagine that this could happen with any kind of information. It doesn't have to be information. It can be data, right? It can be, you know, whatever, like scientific data. It can be blockchain data. It can be any type of arbitrary data that we don't have on chain right now, and we want to bring on chain. So to finish it off, I know it's a long introduction. What you can do with this is you can create like kind of like this next generation of applications on chain that rely on data that is off chain. So you can in real time bring data that's off chain on chain and in a verified and safe manner. And you can then use that data to do all different kinds of DeFi related actions in smart contracts.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I think it is quite interesting that you guys can make a arbitrary data to the kind of the format that the AI can use, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
can you share some more details of the how it works, or the kind of examples of the former arbitrary data becoming the kind of the formatted data that AI can use with using the Swarm protocol? Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Let me think of another example. Or do you want to know like an example from user perspective or from technical perspective?
Uh, I think it would be better to show you the both perspective. And can you also brief introduction, brief details about the what's the arbitrary data? Because many of our audience doesn't know about the what's the arbitrary data in the Korean language. Yeah.
Yes, sure. Um, let's start with a like a broader example, and then I will kind of like extrapolate or delineate and try and bring it home and try and explain it a little bit. So I think maybe later on we can share like a link in the comments to like one of the illustrations which I'm going to talk about. Um, and I will try and simplify it as much as possible, but maybe later on the listeners, they can actually go and look at this chart.
Yeah, sure.
So because like the whole process is kind of like explained in one graphic.
Mm,
So let's start with the meaning of arbitrary data, right? So arbitrary data can actually have multiple meanings, and it can include data in any format or number chosen without any limitations, basically. So it's kind of like derived. So arbitrary, the word is derived from the Latin word arbitrarius, which means uncertain. Okay, so in our context, arbitrary data means exactly that, but it's in the context of decentralized and blockchain information, right? So what I mean with that is like any piece of information that is not verified on chain, we can call arbitrary data, right? So this can be literally anything without any limitations. But there's obviously a type of information and a type of data that's more important to us than other types of information, right? So for example, like, you know, like I probably would not want to go in your Twitter and like bring your entire feed on the blockchain just so I can, you know, so I can verify whether you are tweeting something or not, because, you know, the context really matters. Why do you need to use this piece of arbitrary data, right? So if there's a consecutive process that is running on chain that requires this piece of data, then this arbitrary data needs to be verified, right? So that's why I really like the example of prediction market. So what we are trying to achieve now with the prediction market, so we're building 3 different products on top of Swarm right now, but there's other people building more products on top of Swarm. But what we're building is one of the kind of like cornerstone products, which is a prediction market. But not just a prediction market, we want this prediction market to be able to operate on X. And we want it to be able to sustain and also enable micro markets. And micro markets are basically markets that are based off seemingly micro events. So for example, let's say I have on Twitter, I have like 200,000 followers. You have a bunch of people on Twitter, and we are having an argument about a prediction in the future, right? So you're saying Bitcoin is going to go definitely down the next 30 days, and I'm saying no, Bitcoin is definitely going to go up, right? So this might be a prediction market that is really easy to conclude because all we need is a data source that says the price of Bitcoin at the designated time of, you know, our prediction, right? So let's say if it's 30 days in the future, we just wait until 30 days, we check the price of Bitcoin at that day, and then the market concludes. If it's lower, it's you. If it's higher, it's me, right? That's really easy. And that's when we use data that's already verified. So now let's give you an example with arbitrary data. Let's say that we're having an argument about who can post the most amounts of posts on Twitter in 1 month, right? So we're gonna go like crazy, people like posting like a bunch of tweets every day. So now eventually at the end of the 30 days, we have a set of arbitrary data, which is your newsfeed and my newsfeed, right? So now we need to have a mechanism for verifying who is the winner, because otherwise we cannot conclude our decentralized prediction, right? So in that case, you want to be able to have a very broad spectrum or a very broad network with a lot of nodes in it. You know, you don't want just 5 people to verify this data. You want 1 million people to verify this data, right? But the problem is you need people, and people are expensive. So how are we going to find like that many people to verify this piece of information? And then also think about how many do you really need to create an unbiased verification of the data, right? So these are the questions that other protocols are dealing with, like UMA.xyz. They're using people, but it's not sustainable and it's not scalable because you can never pay enough to those people to maintain this, right? So that's why we're using agent swarms. So this is like a very easy to understand example, but there are situations where there's a larger value of the ultimately verified information. So let's say, do you know Edward Snowden?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Okay. So a guy like Edward Snowden, he has a lot of arbitrary data in his possession, which is of critical value to the entire human race, right? Because he exposed some intelligence agencies that were using or actually abusing their power to spy on people, right? And this is a serious thing. We need to know about this. But there is no larger value or there's no incentive for guys that are not as high level as Edward Snowden, but might have critical information to come out, right? So in this case, you can create a market for this arbitrary data. So on top of Swarm, you could build stuff like whistleblower platforms or information bounty platforms. So let's say like you have an interest to uncover a piece of information, you put a claim out there, you put in that claim contract, you put USDT or any token, and then anybody that has information, or the swarm, right, the agents that have the information or that can go out to find the information, they can do so, and then they can submit that, and then the protocol runs to try and verify this. So then eventually maybe, you know, information gets verified, and then you will earn from that verification if you are contributing to this. Now, there's an important thing that we haven't talked about, which is the zero knowledge aspect, right? So ZK, a very popular topic, and I think honestly, it's like a breakthrough in cryptography. So, but what zero knowledge can do is ultimately it can actually kind of like obscure identities. So for example, like an Edward Snowden, he can publish and he can come out with all of this information without revealing his identity, but we can still verify that he is who he's claiming to be. So all we'd have to know is that he was an ex whatever, I think it was CIA, right? CIA intelligence officer working in the tech department, working on this fundamental technology to do a certain thing. Like we just have to, through the protocol, check his credentials, but only the verifiers would kind of like verify only very small parts of those claims. And the way I like to describe this is, for example, like how can you verify somebody's identity without knowing their identity? Do you know?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay. So this is for your imagination, okay? Let's say we have a we have a card. Yeah. It's an ID card. This ID card, when I read it like that, I will know who this is, right? So now I am going to create a computational proof of this ID card, so I know what it looks like, but I cannot decode it, right? So now and then I'm going to split it up in 100 pieces, and I'm going to distribute each piece to a different person. So somebody verifies that the E in his name of Edward is indeed an E, but this person doesn't know where this E is coming from or where this E belongs to. And you do this with the entire card, and then eventually you put those proofs together and it matches the original proof, right? So you can take really crucial arbitrary data and information, you can verify it, and you can then create, you know, you can update the state of the claim on the protocol, and you can then do stuff with that information. So yeah, so to break it down, now we'll talk a little bit about the chart and about like the different pillars. So you have a claimant, somebody that says something is true or something is false. Then you have the agent swarms, so the agent layer. Then you have the protocol. On the protocol, you have validators. And then eventually you have the public. So the claimant submits unverified info. The agent layer decomposes that information to the atomic claims, so the smallest verifiable unit of arbitrary data, right? Then actually the agents on your device, it's locally run, will generate these CK proofs. They push it to the protocol, it registers and sends CK proofs to the validators. The validators independently verify claims. The validators can be both AI and humans, by the way, or they can be purely, you know, computational devices. And then they find consensus and they push this claim back into the protocol. And then the state of this claim is changed and a record is created. And then eventually the public can read and use this verified claim in smart contract logic or whatever logic. So that's how it works.
I see. I see. Uh, I also think that this kind of the arbitrary data will be really important for the future of the AI. And
Yes.
as you show, as you mentioned that the key point is the process of this, how this verify works. And now I see the how the swarm use the human and the AI agents to verify that informations to see that it is okay or not. So, but many platforms in the market already offers data verification services, right? So what sets Swarm, except from apart from the other centralized platforms, oracles or the fact-checking services in the Web 2?
Yes. So a very interesting question you ask here. So Andrew Durgee, the new CEO of Republic, he's one of our advisors, and I've been speaking to him a lot. And in one of our conversations, he asked the question. He made a statement actually. He said something in the direction of, I'm not exactly paraphrasing him. We'd have to contact him to remember exactly what he said, but he said something in the direction of, the only way that blockchain can become truly decentralized is if we solve the Oracle problem. And what is the Oracle problem? The Oracle problem is mainly that oracles are actually centralized, almost completely centralized instances of kind of like pushing arbitrary data on chain. Because like if you look at oracles, like the most popular oracles, actually the verification process is not very robust, especially when it comes to arbitrary data. And it's not always able to be happening in real time. So there's a lot of protocols out there that try and do this. But first of all, they don't harness the power of AI agents. Their networks are not distributed. So the ownership of these oracles, and actually, it's not just the ownership that matters if you really think about it. It's who is operating the thing, who's actually able to push the code, who's actually able to create new integrations, who is actually able to, on the backends, hypothetically speaking, well, there are backends, obviously, because you bring arbitrary data on chain, right? So you're not just working purely on chain. There's off-chain verification happening. There's off-chain sourcing of data. Who's in control of that, right? I'd rather have a million different agents owned by a million people to be in control of that and have as many points of inference as possible. So our result can be as contextually unbiased as possible and as broadly validated as possible without actually needing humans, right? Because the humans, they will be responsible for creating the swarms and the agents that do the work. And then additionally, we're not just an oracle. The oracle kind of function is a byproduct of the combination of all the swarms together. But if you zoom in a little bit, and if you take the roll-up news as an example, and we can do this for block media too, but it's really interesting, it's that your agents become a middleware layer that is essentially an execution layer for certain functions, right? And you can power entire applications, like Web 2 or Web 3 applications, purely using the execution layer, the middleware layer, which consists of agents. You don't need a backend anymore. You need a front. You don't even need a front end anymore. Of course, front ends are nice for interfacing. Everything can be handled by agents, which are small businesses. So I like to say the following, and probably I'm gonna step on some people's toes. And to be honest, I don't care. Like nowadays, you see agents everywhere, and they're all full of shit. They're just OpenAI APIs wrapped, and like they run some API calls, and the results might feel really nice. Like, oh wow, like I'm asking this agent a certain thing, and he gives me a correct answer. But that's not innovation, and that's not sustainable. That's the same as You know, like it's just a bunch of pump and dump uh, schemes, just that the dump is much more slower than it used to be. You know, normally the chart is like this. Now you go like this, and gradually over the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, you go like this. But you still lose your money in the end, right? So what I like to say is like you can think of us as the virtuals, but on SUI. But instead of having no utility, our agents actually have utility. And what I mean with utility is that you can build a business. You can build a business consisting purely of agents that actually go out and do something useful, and you can earn consistent income from. Not just like, okay, I'm gonna create this agent, it's a lot of fun, people just ape in, like the token price is gonna go up a lot. And then what? And then what? What is your agent really gonna do? Right? Like what is the value of that agent in this society? It has no value because it's a meme, right? But what we want to do and what we're doing is we're saying, hey, when you build an agent on the protocol, it's doing something valuable. It's contributing to something that can actually bring, potentially the entire industry to a new level, because now all of a sudden you can bring all this data on chain and you can use that data. And the context of using the data is just so broad. It mainly covers any kind of like industry, if you will. It just depends on like who values the data, who's willing to pay for it, who who values the data enough for it to be verified and to be used. And that's why we're also building our first product by ourselves to also illustrate that, prediction market, that live on X and so on. Like these things are to us really, to me personally, very, very important and really exciting. And there's a bunch of other stuff that is going to be super exciting. For example, your agents can actually participate on the prediction markets based off the information that you give them and the data that's available to them. Right. So there's still this core aspect of the industry, of the blockchain industry, which is around DeFi and transactions and so on, and really focus on the monetary side of things. Like this is still there. It's still there. Like the core of that, it's not just like, oh, we're gonna like go against the government and verify a bunch of information. Obviously, that's possible, right? Obviously, that's possible when you see corruption, when you see that, like policies are being pushed in favor of maybe like like things that shouldn't be favored, that are against public interest. Like all of these things you can definitely expose and you can put on chain. But more importantly is like, how do you create the value for this information through market models?
I see. So now I see the problems of the current Oracle and the kind of current AI agent systems. So I think this kind of the decentralized network and the platforms to work, role of your Swarm token will be really important. So could you explain the role of the Swarm tokens, how the users earn it or how to use it, and what can be kind of the use for within your ecosystem or to use the AI agent of the other base?